You opened the door, and I'm going to go through it because you referenced oil. And I want to talk about that because the average American driver is saving a lot of money right now thanks to the reduced oil prices. But it has some downsides too. And apparently, as many as 40,000 U.S. workers could lose their jobs because of this downturn in the cost of oil per gallon, per barrel, actually. Do you think it could go much lower? $20 a barrel, $25, $30 a barrel? I think it might even be $30 a barrel now. Could it go lower?
There's two speculations that are floating out there right now, depending on which economist you're listening at. One group of economists believe we could see $20 to $25 a barrel oil, 30 being a low that some others are talking about. Others say they think we're going to stabilize around 45 or 50. If I look at oil and I look at it from just looking at the numbers that are there, I think we're going to see low oil prices for some time, simply because we've got a glut of oil. We have countries like Russia, Saudi Arabia, Arab states, Canada pumping oil, the new technologies that we've developed in the United States to be able to access gas and oil that we weren't able to do just a decade ago have created the opportunity for more oil and more natural gas to come out of the ground. That's good with respect to the fact that it brings prices down, but as you alluded to, we're talking 40,000 potential jobs lost. Mm-hmm. That's a 10% loss of jobs in that particular industry. Back in early January, we had a report come out of a major steel company that was going to be having layoffs simply because of the price drop in oil, leading to the fact that not as many oil rigs were being developed because of some of the new technologies we have, not as many pipelines were being developed, and so we're seeing the impact through the economy that lower oil prices can be good for some, but for other industries it can be very, very hurtful because the people that work in that industry, if there's a glut, then there's no need to pull more oil out of the ground. As a result of that, people lose their jobs.
It's also not so good for some of these countries where this is happening other than the U.S. Arab states, Russia. Could this be something that could prompt the Russians to think about seizing a spoil, invading Israel, Gog Magog?
Russia has really struggled from this oil glut and this price drop that's been out there. It has really put a significant hurt on the Russian economy. They have sizable reserves that are there. So I don't know that seizing property in the Middle East for the purpose of getting more oil would be to their advantage. But one of the things that we have seen, if we look back politically and geopolitically over time, that one of the ways struggling economies tend to right themselves is to go to war, because now they have to put dollars into manufacturing and preparing for war and building the implements of war. We saw that right after the Great Depression in the United States, where we got into this great economic boom and development to prepare to fight the war, and it led us into one of the greatest periods of prosperity in our nation. Could we see a struggle economically in Russia be one of the political motivating drives to move and take action, or maybe to align themselves with Arab neighbors that they are friendly with to help them accomplish their goal of getting rid of Israel? It's a possibility.
You are listening to Understanding the Times Radio. I am Jan Markell. I have on the line John Terry. You can get more information about John at revelationfiles.com, revelationfiles.com. He is a Christian economist, and I try to tap into him 3-4 times a year and at least get an update on the economy from a biblical perspective. John, going into the program, I gave the tease that here in Minnesota, over Christmas, our incredible Mall of America was invaded. I'll use that word. It was a race-related incident, and these are taking place all over the country. Matter of fact, in some places, such as Ferguson, Missouri, some of the businesses actually burned to the ground. What kind of effect could this have on the economy if this were to continue and literally spread from coast to coast?
Jan, as we look at what's going on, initially I would say that the loss of any life is a tragic situation, and the loss of the two young men in Ferguson and the man in New York that have prompted these riots, it's sad when anybody loses their life. The fact that opportunists have sought to tie this to a racial motivation when really none exists when you look at the facts is a completely different conversation we can have. But from an economic perspective, if we look at what happened in Ferguson as a result of the rioting that took place, we saw many business owners that had their entire life savings invested in their vocation, and we saw those buildings buildings ransacked. We saw them burned to the ground. The economic impact on that community, many of those individuals lost everything they had. Barring what little insurance they'll recover from that, if any, they're basically starting over. That economy there in Ferguson is going to struggle for several years to get back on its feet. What we saw in New York and other places across the country during the Christmas holidays, as these protesters began to go in and begin to lay in the floors in the malls and in the shopping centers, we saw individuals going through the shopping centers and basically pulling the merchandise off into the floor just to disrupt commerce. That has a financial impact, not necessarily on a national scale, but in regional areas. It can, if it continues, have a significant impact in creating an adverse financial burden on those communities.